So good afternoon or good morning, maybe, wherever you are, and welcome to this fifth webinar in the Value of Water in Canada series, organized as part of Global Water Futures. My name is Roy Brouwer. I'm a professor in the Department of Economics and Executive Director of the Water Institute here at the University of Waterloo. I would like to start by acknowledging that we're participating today from traditional territories of the First People. And I participate today from land that is part of the traditional territory of the neutral Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee people. Here you see a map of the land. We're located on land granted to the Six Nations that includes 6 miles on each side of the Grand River as part of the Haldimand Treaty that was signed in 1784. University of Waterloo and its centers and institutes like the Water Institute are committed to raise awareness and contribute to Canada's Truth and Reconciliation Commission's calls for actions. And I encourage you to take a moment to recognize the traditional land where you are. Before I introduce today's speaker, just a few housekeeping items. Please add your questions to the Q&A box, and you can do this at any time throughout the talk, and then we'll get to these questions after the talk. Just use the chat box for general comments or technical issues, please. And as my colleague Julie Grant pointed out, I believe in the chat, this webinar will be recorded and posted to the Water Institute's YouTube channel afterwards. So at this point, it's my pleasure to introduce the speaker for today, Jean-Michel Larivière. He is a senior economist with Environment and Climate Change Canada for the last 12 years. He did his master's in economics at the University of Sherbrooke, actually under the supervision from Professor Yi He, who was the second speaker in this webinar series earlier this year in April. He also is the head administrator of the Environmental Valuation Reference Inventory for nearly a decade now, and he's responsible for the entire website reconstruction that happened in 2017 and the ongoing entry of new content into the database. So this is a database that collects information from economic valuation studies. His work is primarily focusing on cost-benefit analysis in support of regulations, mostly pertaining to the reduction of air pollution and the protection of species at risk. He was involved in the benefits assessment, for example, for key regulations such as the reduction of carbon dioxide emissions from coal-fired generation of electricity, the multi-sectoral air pollutants regulations, the regulations amending the on-road vehicle and engine emission regulations, and the sulfur in gasoline regulations, as well the cost-benefit analysis in support of emergency protection orders under the Species at Risk Act. The title of his talk today is Valuation of Water Quality in Canada, an overview of the upcoming policy needs and challenges. He also works quite a bit on water, and we're very happy to have you with us here today, Jean-Michel. I'm going to hand over the floor to you.
Thanks, Roy. Thanks for the introduction. I'll just share my screen now and making sure that can you see the presentation?
Yes, we
see it. Okay, so welcome everyone. So today we'll have a conversation about the upcoming policy needs and the challenges we face in government, particularly with regards to the application of valuation literature findings into governmental analysis. So today there won't be a lot of statistics or equations in the presentation, but more of an honest insider view of the challenges we face. So to give you a brief overview of the presentation, we'll have a few words about the importance of valuing water resources, why it does matter, and what's our current capacity at Environment and Climate Change Canada. And then we'll discuss a bit about why is it so challenging to apply the findings of valuation literature into policy analysis. And finally, we'll turn our attention more to what's coming up in terms of water-related regulations, and also some areas of research would be especially interested in the medium and long term. So our modest contribution to the water valuation discipline is really more the need. So the harsh reality of trade-offs. The key question we're really interested in is, how does a change in water quality translate into a change in welfare, and specifically through which channels? Why are we interested in question? Of course, to better integrate these considerations into cost-benefit analysis for decision making, but also to inform where we should focus our efforts in our limited resources. For instance, should the government and the municipalities dedicate more effort to the protection of a water resource that is directly used by people, like beach access, maybe a drinking water source? Or should we instead try to focus more on protecting remote ecosystem like wetlands that may contribute major ecosystem services at a grander scale, but which may not be directly used by people? So the average Canadian will probably answer, why doesn't government do both, without giving much further thought about where government funds even come from. But while our policy wish list may be infinite, our resource and funding is not. So sometimes we got to make some tough trade-off decision. So in such context, valuation is very helpful to support our decision making. And the point of valuation is not to put a price tag on everything that lives and breathes and is precious, as some would wrongly characterize it, but it's to provide us with some tools to measure the changes in welfare and the relative utility of the trade-off decisions we make. It's not a perfect tool, we acknowledge it, but it is a useful tool nonetheless. In terms of literature on the water quality, there's been a growing body of literature, especially since the early 1990s. And in the EVRI database, there are about 2,000 studies listed on the value of water, with about 175 listed for Canada. If anyone in the attendees is interested in knowing more about, well, environmental valuation, but also doing some quick literature review and scanning the literature classified by topics, you should definitely check out this website, evri.ca, and create a free account. It may really help you in doing efficient literature review. And about a year ago, Roy Brower and Pinto surveyed the Canadian literature and identified about 22 willingness to pay studies, which focus mostly on the water quality ladder. So despite all this literature on the value of water, there's still very limited modeling application at a large scale, especially at the national scale. There are some regional initiatives, like around the Great Lakes, some in the US around the Chesapeake Bay, for instance, but due to the complexity of properly characterizing these impact pathway, there's still not a lot of models existing. So in 2013, Environment Climate Change Canada partnered with Brock University and the University of Victoria in order to develop some prototype of a water quality evaluation model. And now the research is still ongoing and spearheaded by Global Water Futures Initiative, which include many universities, including the University of Waterloo. So the final objective is to kind of develop a model that would translate the change in effluent pollution in water, let's say arsenic, for instance, into changes in concentration and its effect on water quality parameters, like maybe the pH, and then how this change in water quality move us along the water quality ladder, which is a numerical scale associated with different human uses. For instance, at the level of 5, the water quality would be kind of fishable, swimmable at 7, and around 9 it would become drinkable. And then how this movement along the ladder, how can we link it to valuation literature that demonstrate people's willingness to pay to go from one quality state to another quality state. So that is kind of the final intent. There are many challenges along the way, but we got to start somewhere. So now we'll turn our attention more to the practical challenges associated with applying environmental valuation in governmental policy analysis. And here I will broaden the scope to discuss environmental valuation more broadly beyond just water, and we'll come back more to water towards the end of the presentation. So some of the challenges of why it's hard to apply the findings of valuation literature in governmental analysis, there are many possible explanations, and there's been 2 very interesting papers published last year, one by Gillian Kerr and others. they made an expert-station survey and surveyed a couple of public servants in the provincial public service and in the federal level, but also key academics and consultants, in order to identify what were the obstacles of taking valuation practices and integrating them in the policy decision making. The other paper by Rule and others also last year focused more their attention on the imperfect anchoring between what empirical valuation literature provides and the policy reality. So what is needed to apply on the ground. So turning our attention to the first paper by Kerr and others, they identified five main obstacles for the uptake and application of valuation methodologies into governmental decision-making. The first one being the conceptual understanding. Sometimes we use the same words, but do not necessarily speak the same language. I take the simple example of ecosystem service. This word may ring very differently in the mind of a biologist and hydrologist versus an economist. The word value may have a very different meaning if understood by a sociologist and anthropologist versus an economist. So although we're kind of using the same terminology, it may have different meanings, connotation, and potentially implication in the reader's mind. So there's also a need to better distill the science into policy relevant recommendation, and I'll have a little more to say on this later on. Another obstacle in government is definitely internal capacity, which is an aspect I cannot underemphasize. Sometimes we operate under very limited time. And by limited time, I'm saying like doing a cost-benefit analysis for a regulation in a matter of days. I like to say it's a fictional example, hypothetical case, but sometimes it does happen. So when under such constraint, there's just no time to do primary evaluation or a primary study or an on-site study. It's just, there's no time for this. Another issue is that the skills are generally vested in people. The capacity to do environmental evaluation and do this kind of analysis is a very specialized skill set. That is, there's not a huge pool of available personnel doing this. And if someone from Climate Change Canada moves on to finance for another job, and most of his work is now focused on fiscal reforms and such analysis, his skill set for doing environmental evaluation may be on pause for maybe a long while. So we're constantly on the lookout to recruit people who are skilled in doing such analyses and into training people to do such analyses. Another obstacle in government is path dependency, especially under time constraints. When we've got only a few days to deliver an analysis, human nature is such that it may revert to what they know, what they've always done. So sometimes using new approach and methodology, there might be a natural resistance to this. Another obstacle is the lack of regulatory and institutional mandate. For some departments like our own and Department of Fisheries and Ocean, the integration of ecosystem services is part of our mandate. It should be naturally part of our scope. But for other departments, agency, and other levels of government, especially at the provincial or municipal level, where the capacity to integrate such consideration in decision-making is very limited, it might be just perceived as a nice to have. And if they have huge time constraints, it might be a consideration that is kind of left on the side, or maybe just mentioned qualitatively without any further analysis. Which leads us to our fifth obstacle, that if there's no institutional mandate to include ecosystem services into the decision-making process, then this change will be brought in by people who are keen on requiring that an ecological consideration are integrated into decision-making process. It could be a DG, an ADM, for instance, but these people have to stay in charge long enough to really induce a permanent change in the work culture and in the analytical practices. because if they don't stay long enough, then we may revert back to the path dependency issue, and people will just revert back to doing simple analysis and trying to minimize effort. And I would add maybe some more observation from the policy battlefield. The fact that we have limited time and resource to do an analysis may lead us to rely on proxy valuation approach like benefit transfer techniques. It always comes with an inherent fear or discomfort of using such techniques because our main product, like a regulation, will be published in the Canada Gazette and subject to public scrutiny. And if there are follow-up legal actions, for instance, or judiciary review, access to information requested, there might be additional court scrutiny. So, of course, there might be some hesitancy of presenting estimates that are derived from benefit transfer methodologies, because regulations are not necessarily the best place to try our hand at exploratory evaluation work. It has to meet a certain quality bar given the large scrutiny. Another consideration is that environmental literature generally contributes more to the benefit side of regulatory cost-benefit analysis. And Treasury Board Secretariat, in their guidance, they ask us to be always on the conservative side, so to always take into account the worst case scenario. So they want to avoid any underestimation of the cost. So they will ask us for whether we've taken into account the full list of all the potential costs. So sometimes our eyes may be drawn more on the cost side of the equation for that reason. Also, sometimes the government may want to move forward regulation based on other consideration than just whether it's a net cost or net benefits. Sometimes there is a moral duty for the government to intervene because the status quo cannot be maintained, or there is a legislative need to intervene. So in such case, the demonstration of monetized environmental benefits may not be as necessary for the decision making. And finally, sometimes, however, environmental considerations may be given a very high standing into the decision-making process and high importance, even if there are no dollar sign attached. And it is especially true of protection orders under the Species at Risk Act. So despite all this, there is growing pressure and increased public demand, especially from Indigenous communities and environmental organizations, to still better assess the environmental benefits of our policies for transparency purposes, of course, but also to better educate the Canadian public about the full range of benefits of environmental protection. Now, turning our attention to Rule and others, who discuss more the kind of mismatch between what environmental literature may provide and the policy needs. And one of their main assertions I thought was pretty spot on. They said that the type of research that drives policy interests and demonstrate the importance of ecosystem services is not the same type of research that is needed to drive policy implementation on the ground. So a lot of the environmental literature's point is to just demonstrate the value or the significance of such ecosystem or ecosystem service. We fully acknowledge that policy analysts need to learn to think a little more like scientists, but researchers also need to think a little more like policy analysts in their communication. As the head administrator of the EVRI database, I had the opportunity to supervise the data entry of thousands of academic journal publication into the database. And one observation really struck me is this kind of frequent statement that goes along the line of this, saying that in terms of policy application, our studies suggest that whatever we valued in our paper is important and should be given consideration. Maybe add one or two sentences, not necessarily adding much more policy meat around the bone, but Essentially, if the policy analysts, especially those in our department, are the target audience, then there's a risk of just preaching to converts. We already are aware of the importance of these ecosystem services. And the policy analysts, the audience, may be left to wonder about how to practically apply the findings of this particular studies into the decision-making process. And on that note, I would share a little more personal observation from valuation literature, again, based on my experience with the EVR database. There's still some reporting and precision in the literature that really adds complexity when it comes down to applying benefit transfer technique. For instance, if a stated preference survey was done, what was the year of the survey? If it was done post-pandemic versus pre-pandemic, for instance, it may have implication on people's budget constraint. And even the precise location of the study, sometimes we have to cross-reference with other publications from the same author if they use the same survey data set in order to pinpoint where the study was even located. And probably one of the most frequent omission I noticed is the willingness to pay estimate value per respondent or household. Sometimes it's not quite clear. So I would highly encourage any author who wants to publish evaluation estimate literature to have a look into the existing databases. Every is one of them, but there's also many others, the TEEB, the SciSys, the SVD, in order to check what these databases, what kind of information they gather and they need, and making sure in the publication that such information is really presented upfront and easily retrievable. Precision is super important for accurate benefit transfer application. Another observation I noticed from literature is the very limited recommendation that pertain to benefit transfer potential. There are some studies that are so site-specific, context-specific that the estimates cannot be transferred over to another location or context without stretching the meaning of the values. If so, it might be very useful to plainly say so. And if the benefit, the estimates can be subject to benefit transfer, then under which general condition? For instance, if a study assessed the ecosystem services provided by a wetland upstream of a big city, it might be worth mentioning that these values may not be transferred to another wetlands that is located downstream of a big city, because some of the services like water filtration, flood control may no longer be relevant for this other site, for this second wetland. And there is a high risk of overestimating the value of that second site. So we agree it may take some publishing space to kind of make these recommendations, but it might be service to the valuation discipline in the long run. Another point is what are the important warnings to take into consideration if doing benefit transfer. For instance, benefits per ton. A ton of NOx will not have the same impact if limited in a region versus another. The health and the environmental impacts may be different. And if emitted in an urban context versus a rural context, if emitted at the ground level versus from a tall smokestack, in which case there might be very different chemical transportation characteristics. And also if there were other pollutants in the mix, like VOCs, it may result in very different profile of secondary ozone formation. So all these kind of nuances may be very useful to educate the readers about what can be done and not done with the estimates that are presented in the paper. Of course, I acknowledge that we can never fully prevent reckless benefit transfer application, but by providing more warnings and educational safeguards, it may prevent some of these reckless attempts. So moving on to end this section, I would offer two key factors that policy analysts pay very close attention to. The first one is equity, even the perceived equity. The focus of empirical valuation research is to estimate the most accurate willingness to pay, the most precise, and there's increased reliance on latent class groupings approach, for instance. But the focus of policy folks is to have a willingness to pay that is most representative of any Canadian and that is equitable. So because if we estimate the value of a water resource, for instance, and if looking under the hood, the value is higher for this group of people because they have a higher income and hence why they have higher willingness to pay, aggregate willingness to pay value overall, it may raise some sensitivity issue when publishing such information in government documents. So whenever producing estimates that are up to be maybe taken by policy analysts to integrate into the decision-making process, equity is an important consideration to keep in mind. Another one is the scalability. While evaluation research typically propose ecological changes that are noticeable enough or significant enough to trigger a response by the surveyed people, the policy intervention may induce more marginal change in the environmental situation. However, if you stack up the effect of all these smaller regulations, they may cumulatively have a high effect. I take the example of visibility improvement. If conducting a choice experiment for how much people are willing to pay for better visibility and you propose them different images, typically you have to propose respondents with a change in improvement in the visual range in the order of 40%, so that the human eye can notice the difference. So often the surveys have proposed change in that range. But when it comes to the impact on visibility range from policy intervention, like a typical policy would often induce changes in visual range, localized change, in the order of 1 to 10%. And even if taking a high impact policy like the regulation on coal-fired electricity generation, which had a high impact on air pollutant emissions, we were around that, like 10% improvement in visual range. So in the survey, we offer to respondents a 40% change in visual range, and in the policy reality, it would be more something around a little less than 10%. So when providing estimates again for policy uptake about such change, we need to make sure that the proposed change align with the range of plausible impact from policy intervention. So now we'll discuss a bit about the upcoming water effluent regulations that are in the pipe, and we'll also list some of the research topics that we would be very interested in as a department. So the first regulations in the pipe is the coal mining effluent regulation. Majority of the coal is being produced in the western provinces and mostly in BC. And the general objective of the policy would be to reduce the risk that effluents pose, especially selenium, to fish habitat, and the use of fish by people. And selenium here is really the key driver because of its high genotoxicity. You have some horrible pictures below of the impact of selenium on fish population, can distort their spine, create a second mouth, and I even saw a picture of a fish with two separate heads attached to the same body. So selenium is really a nasty substance, and its pollution effect may linger on over not even decades, but centuries, which may require abatement technologies and mitigation measures to operate in perpetuity. So definitely our government has an interest in regulating these effluent more closely. Another regulations in the pipe is the pulp and paper effluent regulations. Currently, our PPER standards are relatively low if compared to other jurisdictions, and they are benchmarked against outdated technologies. So we have to kind of update these regulations. Again, the objective would be to reduce the threats that is being posed to fish population, and fish consumption by human. And some of the targeted substance will be the release of nitrogen, phosphorus, and suspended solids. Another area of work that we are being increasingly brought in is the sentencing of environmental offenses. In 2020, you may have noticed that Volkswagen was ordered to pay a historical fine of nearly $200 million to the Environmental Damage Fund for implementing emission defeat devices in their vehicle, in their diesel vehicle. And following a ruling by the BC Supreme Court in 2004, the court starting expressing increased interest in evidence-based monetary evaluation of the damages to the human health or the environment in order to inform their sentencing of such offenses. And the key word here is really evidence-based. So if presenting estimates to the court, it has to meet a high credibility and accuracy bar, because it will be, the defense will obviously try to kick the tires, if not trying to stab them entirely. So it's not necessarily the place to try our hand again at exploratory and very creative valuation work. It has to be robust enough. And while there is modeling capacity existing within the federal government to produce indicative values of the impact of air pollutants on human health and the environment, we acknowledge there is no such capacity at the moment for the impact of effluents. And definitely an area of concern for us, because we never know when and where the next tailing ponds dam will break, and where there will be an environmental disaster occurring. Now we'll turn our attention more to the research interests. So I will present 4 areas where our department would be very interested in having more research support. The first one being obviously the hydroeconomic modeling. So how to translate the tonnage of effluent substances, the releases, to concentration level. In other words, how do we go from the flux of pollution to the stock dimension where the damages stem from? And where do these effluent substances end up and potentially accumulate? So some kind of fate analysis capacity in order to pinpoint which habitat would be highly impacted, which species may be more impacted by the effluents. And also, how could the increase in effluent substances contribute to fish mortality and to the fishing and their drinking water advisory? So how does it really trigger such intervention? And also on that note, do people really respond to an improvement in water quality to a drinkable state or within a drinkable state, especially if there's a history of mistrust of a source of drinking water, a river? And people, if they purchase bottled water for years because they didn't trust the water from the tap, even if we factually improve the water quality to a drinkable state, the water is safe to drink, but people may not revert to drinking from the tap because they still mistrust the water, or because they've been drinking from bottled water for so long that they do not see the need for changing. It's part of their habits. So definitely people's response and behavior with regards to the change in the ecological situation would have a very important implication for our welfare changes calculation, especially if linking any estimate to the water quality ladder. And also beyond that, what are the lingering impacts of legacy pollution or of a bad ecological reputation? So if people stop fishing in a river because it was just polluted, and the water quality of that river increased again so that it's safe to fish, would people return them? Or is this one river kind of burned forever in people's mind? So definitely more research into these considerations, people's response would be of high interest to us. Another area of research would be nutrient effluents, and especially those in the Great Lakes. So there's very little literature on the cost associated with algal blooms, and here I mean more the non-market and the welfare impact costs. There are some about the hedonic, using a hedonic valuation approach, but what would people be willing to pay to avoid the disseminity, the visual impact and the smell of these algal blooms, or the privation of recreational opportunities, beach closures? So more research on this would be of interest. Another area would be the return on investment on phosphorus recovery programs from waste streams. Canada's domestic supply of phosphorus is very limited. We are mainly an importer of phosphorus, and Morocco is a big producer, but other major producers of fertilizers are China, Russia, and Ukraine. And now, thanks to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, Russia is on the commercial blacklist, and Ukraine's exports are blockaded in the Black Sea, which induce a worldwide shock in the supply of fertilizer, which steeply increase crop producers' production costs. So with the current technology, the return on investment on phosphorus recovery tools was not justified. But under the new situation, is it justified? And is there any demonstration of public support that we could maybe monetize via willingness to pay survey? If people are willing to pay for such phosphorus recovery because of the positive environmental impacts or the implication on food security, if we included this dimension in the equation, maybe the return on investment would turn out to be positive. So definitely an area for exploration. And overall, there's not a lot of willingness to pay literature on the resource recovery from waste. So definitely an area our department would be interested in. Another area would be the payment for ecosystem services. So should the government of Canada implement a payment scheme for the continued provision of ecosystem services by landowners, and would be especially interested in wetlands? The answer to that question, well, an economist would obviously answer it depends, and it depends mostly of the extent to which we can make it right. And there's a lot of literature demonstrating, yeah, it might be a good idea to introduce a payment scheme for ecosystem services conservation. But more importantly is how to do it right. And this is really where we would need more guidance and more research done. Are there lessons that we can learn from other jurisdictions and other contexts that we could transfer and apply to Canada? Are there Canadian specific pitfalls that we need to avoid when designing our policy? It could be linked to even just the financial fiscal regime. There might be some disincentives there that may compete with what we want to put in place. How to optimize the cost recovery of such program while still optimizing the achievement of the ecological objectives, and how to provide the right incentives to stimulate uptake by the landowners. And regarding landowners, how do they make their decision? We need to have a better understanding of their individual decision-making process, because it's all based on individual opportunity costs. And should we have an approach that is more action-oriented, so we require the landowners to do these steps, and we'll give them payment? Or should we instead have a more result-oriented approach that here are the general objectives you need to meet, with some ecological indicators that might still be up to debate which one we should use, and then we'll give payment if these objectives are attained? And how do we measure the progress? How do we measure the success of the program, and making sure that the landowners really made their part of the bargain, and without having inspection costs that would explode? So it's kind of all these consideration that we would need more guidance on in order to kind of fine tune and really make something, a policy that is solid. And final area of research would be interested in, obviously, is the importance of water resource for Indigenous community. We need to develop a better understanding of how the water resources are embedded in the ways of lives, the culture, the spirituality, and the identity of Indigenous people. And the typical monetary valuation may just be inappropriate to really address such dimension. Although I'm a strong advocate of environmental valuation, I also acknowledge there are some things that should just not be monetized. And through all my scanning of thousands of valuation publications, there's probably good reason I never came across a single study that assessed people's willingness to accept to forfeit on their religious beliefs or their spiritual conviction. The very idea would probably be unacceptable to most respondents because religious and spiritual convictions are part of one's identity. So it's one thing to ask people living in the city how much they'd be willing to pay to protect this water resource out there. But if you always live next to that river and it's part of your spiritual rights, your ancestors lived there, your ancestors were buried there, and it's part of who you are, typical valuation may no longer be the right tool. So we need to have more sensible research done on these considerations. Valuation may be very useful for maybe subsistence fishing, for instance, and the kind of replacement cost. There are some areas where it could definitely be useful, but we also have to remain humble about the limits of its applications. And sometimes presenting the full story without any dollar sign attached may be the right way to support decision makings and decision maker in making the right decisions for the right reasons. So if any participants today is doing research on one of these areas or is contemplating doing research in any of these areas, feel free to reach out to us and we could discuss, or if you want to present a research proposal. No promise on the outcome, of course, but we can certainly commit to listen and pay due attention. So to finally land off this presentation, environmental valuation, we all agree, is a conceptually challenging discipline, but there are additional layers of challenges when applying it to the governmental analysis context. And hence why the policy analysts should try to communicate the research needs well in advance to academia, because if we are given only a few days or weeks to deliver an analysis, it's too late to engage the research community. So we have to voice our research interests well in advance, which is what we are doing today in part. And on the other hand, academic researchers should also aim to provide practical policy recommendation beyond just demonstrating the value of or the importance of the environment. Because if the targeted policy analysts are people in our department, there's a risk of preaching to converts already. But we also need more guidance regarding how these estimates could be used or not. What are the potential applications, but also the limitation of the research findings. And this entire discussion kind of highlight finally the importance of maintaining efficient communication channels between the policy and the research realms. So we're kind of thankful for the opportunity today to engage the research community and openly present the challenges we deal with, and asking for support and people's interests. So I will end the presentation here, and before taking questions, I just want to put in the important disclaimer that today I'm kind of the individual voice of a collective group. There are many things I worked on, many subjects I worked on this presentation, but some on which I didn't. So there might be some question that may reside out of the scope of my expertise. And if it's the case, I'll be happy to take the question and relay it to the policy leads or the people, the subject matter experts within the department that who work on these. So I may not know everything, but I know the people who do know the answer. So up to you, Goy.
Thank you very much, Jean-Michel. This was very, very interesting and very useful for those of us in the audience working in research. So there's time for questions. There's already one question in the Q&A box. I'm going to ask a first question, if you don't mind, and then I'll get to the Q&A questions. Those of you who have questions for Jean-Michel, please add them to the Q&A box, and then we'll get to them. Just to kick off the discussion a little bit, Jean-Michel, so I was interested in hearing about the use of Ben-Trans values that you refer to, and how strict or how strictly they are evaluated when you try to bring these kind of cases to court. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about how accurate exactly these values have to be, and if you have perhaps even experience with rejections of values of benefits, values that you used in the past.
Mm-hmm. It's well, it is a sensitive question because there's not much I can say with regards to litigation, because some things are under a secret, and there might be some kind of court agreements. So I cannot provide any specific example because of the secrecy. But typically we try to either use an approach that has been either used in previous regulatory analyses, for instance, like in a methodology that has been seen, published, used, subject to public and court scrutiny already, and maybe replicating or using the same approach for now an environmental offense context. So this is a little easier for the court to accept and harder for the defense to try to kick the tires, because it's a methodology already agreed upon. But sometimes we face environmental issue with very or a type of offense we haven't seen in the past, or for which there is little capacity. So in which case we would also legal folks are not generally willing to take a lot of chances in court with creative approach. So we acknowledge now there is kind of a limit to what we can provide, and there are things that we just cannot provide estimates on at the moment, but we are working to develop capacity in order to provide estimates. But the bar is high; it has to stand up in court. So and the defense may sometimes bring scientists or experts in order to kind of challenge and to take a look into the modeling assumptions. So it has to meet a high bar.
Yeah, like in the case of the Exxon Valdez, the NOAA panel, for example. You mean when they had the oil spill, the Exxon Valdez also brought in an expert panel to counter the values that some of the researchers brought up. Very quickly, a follow-up question. So in your experience, are revealed preference data more accepted than stated preference data? Can you make a distinction like that?
With regards to court acceptance, there's not a lot of, although courts express willingness to be presented with more non-market valuation estimates to inform the sentencing, it's not necessarily a ton of application or presentation of such estimates to the court. It was mostly in the Canfor case in 2004 that the court opened up this avenue of presenting, but there hasn't been, so it's hard to really have a full sample of, okay, whether the estimates were like based on the revealed preference approach or the stated preference approach, and there's probably not large of sample enough to draw a conclusion of which one has higher chance of being accepted by the court. So maybe if in 20 years from now we'll have the same question, we'll have a better sample to answer such question. But right now, the information is rather limited to really tackle this.
Yeah, thank you, Jean-Michel. So I'm gonna move to Marco Capo. He has a question. He asks, to what extent will a Canadian national willingness to pay value for increased water quality towards achieving protective levels for main ecological issues help the federal government assess their policies? Wouldn't this be an efficient solution?
It definitely would be useful in my mind. The challenge is often the upstream science part of how even if we have values of people, how much they value an improvement in water quality, sometimes it's demonstrating that the policy or that your kind of control of the emissions, for instance, would affect the water quality and bring it to that state. So it's kind of a complex impact pathway to fully characterize the change, and each chain has its own sets of difficulties and even data challenges. So one of the challenges we face is often just baseline information. For instance, especially on remote areas, if an environmental disaster occurs in a very remote northern lake in BC, sometimes it's not guaranteed that we have even baseline information to start with. What were the conditions of the lake before the disaster? So in order to make the assessment of the incremental damages, how much damage were contributed to environment by the offense, sometimes if we do not have the monitoring capacity or the start information to begin with, it's very hard to have the increment part that we need in order to multiply it by some X dollar value. So
okay, thank you. So if there are other questions, please add them to the Q&A box. I'm going to continue with some questions from myself while I wait for some others to maybe join in still. I was also wondering a little bit, how much do you use the EFRI database yourself?
Oh, well, I every now and then I use it, maybe not as much for water research, because, well, a lot of the research for the water quality valuation model development is spearheaded by academia. But yeah, every now and then when I need to do some willingness to pay for of people for protecting that species, for instance. Okay, is there anything in the PPER database about air pollutants? So kind of cost per tons of certain pollutants, and seeing the literature and the full range of, for one pollutant, how much it can vary by like multiple orders of magnitude depending on where these emission sources are located and how much people they are exposed to these emissions. So I routinely use it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And maybe following up quickly on that one. So I also heard you talk about your research needs, like everyone else, of course, in the area of hydroeconomic modeling, but maybe even also in the context of payments for ecosystem services. My impression was a little bit when you started off discussing these research fields, that some of the information that you were looking for was not even economic. It was more related to physical dose response relationships. And I see you nodding. So a lot of that is actually preceding possibly even the economic analysis or the economic impact assessment, just focusing on how a pressure reduction results in an impact in a water body, for example, where economists like us are relatively comfortable, and it's relatively easy to calculate the costs of a best management practice, for example, that we know that reduces a certain amount of fertilizer or phosphorus on the land. But then the question is, how does that impact the water? So those kind of questions are typically not answered by economists, because we don't have those kind of environmental quality models. So you're in Environment Climate Change Canada. There must be colleagues of yours that also perhaps work on these kind of models.
Yeah, definitely. The economic part is at the very end of the kind of impact pathway. Typically, it's once we have the incremental change to the environment, then okay, how do we measure the change in welfare from this variation in the ecological state? But to take an example with air pollution, we have our colleague from Meteorological Services that they're if starting like at the very beginning of a regulation that would target air pollutants, we have our colleagues from another team who will try to model what would be the change in emissions of this whole sector, industrial sector, for instance, if we put in the regulation. Then we got to translate this change in emissions into a change in concentration in the air, because being the damage to human health is linked to the concentration of pollutant, not just the emission, the flux. So Meteorological Services will use their big supercomputer model, and it would translate how these change in emission across the industrial sectors would then change the concentration of pollutants in the air. And then we will use this concentration change into the air quality evaluation model, but the Health Canada would also use their ACUBAT model in order to try to estimate what would be the impact on maybe visibility improvement on the crops production and on human health and respiratory illnesses and such. So there's a lot of science that needs to feed into what is the delta, the incremental change in the environmental situation before starting any valuation or economic calculation approach.
Okay, perfect. So in the meantime, we've got some new questions. So I'm going to start with Wesley Wright. He says, great presentation. And then his question is, monetization of ecological services is challenging. What tools are out there to help with this?
Oh, well, there might be a couple of tools, and you need the right tool for the right job. So which tool will depend on what you want to do, but you can definitely check out the EVRI database, evri.ca, which I presented, which kind of classifies a lot of valuation literature, and then people, even if they may not use it for benefit transfer, still they can be exposed to the methodology, the different range of estimates that exist. And it might be very informative just to kind of expand your vision of the potential ways of monetizing or valuing even a single ecological consideration. There might be multiple ways to do it. So EVRI is definitely one database that can be looked into, and it will generally, the literature would point out to existing tools. It may refer to other modeling capacity elsewhere in the world and from academia.
Thank you. Wesley is thanking you in the chat. My colleague Susan Elliott is online as well, and she asks, you hinted at the psychosocial impacts of perceived exposure. How much research is happening in this area?
It's hard to tell how much is happening in that area, because I'm not necessarily a subject matter expert and I haven't done a full literature review on that, but it's definitely one area we're interested in. People's perception and their response to even a factual change in the ecological situation. How do people respond to that? Because we often assume that if the ecological situation improves, then there will be a gain in welfare. People will be happier. But if there's a strong history of mistrust, even if it improves, people may still not experience a change in welfare because either they don't believe it or they still doubt that the resource is safely consumable. So it's definitely an area of research would be interested in, because it has huge implication on the welfare calculations.
Yeah. Do you believe that you can that you can monetize them? You don't necessarily need stated preference research for that, perhaps. You can look at other value indicators.
Maybe not stated preference research, but I could see it also being done in the context of a survey by how you present the scenario, or then asking people if there's been an improvement in the water, just anecdotal data, if there's been an improvement over time of a river, and asking people whether they consume, they drink from the tap or not. You could probably gauge with statistics whether there's actually was kind of a response. So there might be different ways to achieve the same research focus.
Okay, thanks. So I'm afraid we have to stop here. It's 1 minute to the hour. Susan Elliott in the Q&A box included a statement from W.I. Thomas, 1969. If a situation is defined as real, it will be real in its consequences. So I'm going to leave that with you, Jean-Michel, and thank you once again very, very much for this fantastic overview. It was very informative, very good to know where your research needs lie, and I genuinely hope that through a webinar series like the one that we have here, we're able to bring the research closer to you based on the presentation that you just gave. I want to thank our audience for today for participating. Thank you for asking questions. Thank you for your participation. I'm looking forward to welcome you again in about a month's time. We're going to have a speaker on the 3rd of August, Professor Laurie Bradford from the University of Saskatchewan, who's going to talk about some of the research needs that Jean-Michel was referring to. She's going to talk about the cultural and social values from community-engaged research. So that will relate to a large extent to values that they're trying to capture in Indigenous communities. So that's on the 3rd of August. Another Wednesday, 12 noon Eastern time, And I look forward to welcome you and see you all again online by that time. Once again, thanks so much, Jean-Michel, for this presentation, and the audience, thanks for your participation. Stay well. Thank you very much.